Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Children and Families Overview and Scrutiny panel. I don't have any announcements, and as far as apologies go, over to you.
We've got apologies, Chair, from Tim Reed, our church rep. Thank you.
Thank you. I should just remind you that the meeting is being webcast, and also if a fire alarm goes off during the course of the meeting, this will not be a test, and I would therefore ask you to make your way to the assembly point via the emergency fire exit point. Samantha would guide you if that were necessary. So, moving on to item 2, declarations of interest or party whip. I don't have a reminder of what the specific declarations of interest are, but I'm sure you're all very aware of what they are. So if there are no declarations of interest, pecuniary or personal, we'll move on to
No, Chair.
to public participation. I think there are no speakers.
No, Chair.
All right. So item 4 is confirmation of the minutes. The minutes of the meeting held on the 11th of the May 2026, and anyone who was at that meeting, if you disagree with anything in it, please speak now. Otherwise, I will sign them as a true record. Okay, thank you very much. And so we move on to the substantive item of the day, the SEND reform plan. And we're hoping to deal with this in an hour, but it may take a bit longer, in which case the other items would have to be a bit shorter. We're provided with an update on the National SEND Reform Programme and our own local SEND Reform Plan. The report summarises the national policy direction, local case for change. It outlines the partnership's 3-year reform journey, which is the important part, and provides assurance on governance, delivery, monitoring and risk management arrangements. We have a number of people in attendance for this item, and it might be useful if you could identify yourselves and just explain what your interest is in the meeting. Thank you. Could we start with Natalie?
I wasn't expecting that.
All right, we'll start with Adam then. Thank you.
Thank you. I was expecting that. Suffice to say, I'm not going to introduce everyone here and now, and I'm sure at various points they'll speak. But in terms of the SEND partnership, we've got pretty good representation across the room at the moment. Parent care, I've said I'm not going to introduce everyone, and now I'm about to introduce everyone. Hazel Shaw, Parent Carer Forum, Claire McLean, Matt CEO, Sarah Wilkins. I won't give her full title, it's such a long title. She's Assistant Director Education Early Years and a bunch of other stuff. Daniela Carson, SEND and All Age Disability, respective CMRs to my right, who are more than capable of introducing themselves, and I've got no doubt will have something to say at some point. Behind me, Jade Brooks. I won't do her title justice. Next to Jade Brooks, we've got Scott Parker from the Health and Care Trust. We got Public Health here as well, who are here for another item. Suffice to say, when we talk about the world of SEND and partnership working, and particularly SEND reform, there's an absolute relevance to public health, which in subsequent overview and scrutiny sessions, I'm sure we'll get to in terms of more detail. You'll all be pleased to know I'm not going to talk for an hour, and I'm certainly not going to talk for an hour and a half, and I'm not going to recite the entire content of the papers that you will have all had sight of. They are meaty papers, to say the least, so I'm going to work cheekily on the presumption that attendees today have had the opportunity to read through those papers and at least the opportunity to form a general idea. Just to get folks in the room by way of introduction, before we go to questions, I guess, if that's okay with you, Chair. The context of the situation, so I think all attendees will be familiar from a multitude of forums and arenas where SEND and the current situation with regard to SEND has been discussed in finite detail, that the SEND system itself has been under significant pressure for a significant period of time. So just to put that into context, since 2014, EHCPs have risen incrementally by around about 70 to 80%. So dependent nationally, it's a feature throughout. Obviously, there are variances from one particular partnership to the other, but a huge jump is the context that I guess people need to tune into. From a Worcestershire perspective, I actually wrote notes for myself last night, just by way of introduction. I managed to get the figures wrong. I was going to say to you all, we now have 8,500 children subject to EHCP. We're wrong. Fortunately, we've got an AD who knows her numbers far better than I do. 8,700, and she did tell me a lot is what people need to tune into. Around about an 80% rise since 2014. On top of that, again, a recurrent feature that everyone in this room will be familiar with, certainly from a county council perspective, both officers and political members. The financial situation at Worcestershire is critical, dire, challenging, whatever combination of words you want to use. And from a SEND perspective, there's an absolute relevance to high needs deficit. So high needs accumulated deficit by the end of the last financial year stood at almost £181 million, which is an eye-watering figure. So there's the context there as well. And last but not least, and I'm mindful, I've got the chair of the Parent Carer Forum to my left. I'm pretty confident, amongst other things, one of the things that she would be saying, and I would be in agreement with, as would everyone else, is that the service that families are receiving and children are receiving is, and we're talking nationally, and it's absolutely applicable to Worcestershire, is inconsistent. You can't have over 8,500 EHCPs with a system that doesn't have the capacity or indeed the continuity to provide the level of support and the level of intervention that's required. And that's felt by children and families. I'm scared to look at Hazel Shaw because she will have a lot more to say than that. So by no means am I suggesting that's illustrative of the whole picture. By way of summary, what I'm trying to explain, I guess, to people is, understandably, local authorities, SEND partnerships, 151 officers, amongst others, have been lobbying government for a significant period of time saying something has to be done because the system is not working. Ultimately, that's led us to where we're at this juncture, which is why we're here today. So the white paper, Every Child Achieving and Thriving, was published end of February this year. And essentially that encapsulates the notion of what SEND reform is all about. So I'm not going to list everything that's attached to the report that's been submitted to Overview and Scrutiny members for today, but that is there amongst a whole host of other things as well. So that sets the theme, the expectations in terms of SEND reform. And what we, as a SEND partnership, as all SEND partnerships have been asked to do, expected to do, is we've got to demonstrate, well, how are we going to implement on a local level the SEND reform ethos, what's contained in that white paper. SEND reform itself, again, I'm being very broad brush about this and deliberately so, is centred on inclusion. It's centred on targeted support in class. It's centred on intervening and supporting as early as possible. So when you think about drift, when you think about delay, there are parallels with the children's wellbeing and schools bill as well. Get in as early as possible. Don't use process, protocol, policy, legislation. Don't let that impair you. Intervene as early as possible for that individual child and individual children. There's an absolute focus on supporting individual children without there being a reliance on diagnosis. So you can see the relevance to EHCPs here, which ultimately are going to be replaced with individual support plans. So the focus is very much about individual need, individual support, and the avoidance of escalation of need wherever possible. So that's where I think there are parallels, and it's really important, not for today, but it's really important that for the sake of efficiency and equally the sake of understanding that we join those dots up, because the notion, the direction of travel is very much about intervening and supporting as early as possible. In terms of the SEND reform plan itself, again, it's all in the papers. Alongside that is what's called a maturity assessment and a maturity matrix. That's essentially saying, from the partnership, from Worcestershire Local Partnership, this is where we think we're at this moment in time. This is how we measure ourselves at this moment in time. And in terms of that maturity assessment, that's where the entire partnership have fed into that. It will always be an ever-changing situation, and rightly so. If that remained the same today as it was a couple of months ago, as it will be in a few months' time, then we've got a problem. We have to continually evolve as a partnership. That's what the maturity assessment is. The expectations with regard to the SEND reform plan were that it was submitted on June the 19th. I'm not taking credit for this. Let me be crystal clear about that, but there are a bunch of people here today, a bunch of people to my left here, amongst others, who worked tirelessly, and it would be remiss if I didn't very loudly and very clearly offer my both appreciation and recognition of that, because this was also done. Remember, the white paper was published on the 23rd of February. Surprise, this is the white paper, and there's going to be a consultation on it, and that consultation ended in May. And by the way, we would like to know, central government would like to know how you as a partnership are going to implement this, and we want to know by June 19th. And just to keep you on your toes, we'll just surprise you with the SEND monitoring inspection, as you're writing that as well. So I'm not saying that to be critical, far from it. I'm saying that to complement the partnership who were involved in producing that SEND reform plan and all of the associated documents. As you've seen for yourselves, the plan is not a couple of pages. It's a meaty exercise, to say the least. They were clever when they produced that plan. There's an irony in I think, all of this. As you'll all be aware, Worcestershire as the local partnership has been subject to SEND improvement and continues to be focused on SEND improvement. An easy thing to say, difficult thing to achieve, and certainly a difficult and challenging thing to continually achieve. But the irony is that that process, that journey, if you like, that the partnership has been on since the last full inspection, the last full SEND inspection, is one where the partnership have become far more collaborative than I think was ever the case previously. So as a consequence of that, some of the documentation required, particularly the maturity assessment, in some respects we were on the front foot, certainly compared to other partnerships. So that's the irony and perhaps the advantageous part of it as well. What's relevant with regard to the SEND reform plan as well is the access to what's known as the High Needs Stability Grant. So when I talk about we are currently running by the end of March 26 with high needs deficit of 180, call it 181 million, successful access to the High Needs Stability Grant means that essentially we can clear 90% of that. In real terms, over £162 million. So when we go back to the financial situation that this council is currently under, I obviously can't overstate the relevance of that. You've seen behind me, we've got the Children's Finance Officer, who we link in with on a continual basis. And next to her, we've got the 151. I can't imagine why he's here. Obviously, high needs stability grant is a massive relevance to the council as well. The plan, I won't go through in fine detail. I'm sure folks will have questions or comments they want to make about that. It outlines the governance arrangements. It outlines the delivery of the plan itself. It outlines the monitoring arrangements. It outlines the goals, the expectations. Essentially, the plan is centred on a 3-year transformation approach. The 3-year roadmap, it's another one of the appendices. And the plan, you'll notice that the plans, what's also included in the appendices, are the children and young people's outcomes. In other words, children and young people saying these are the outcomes that we want to be achieved for us. And what we've done is we've made sure that the plan itself aligns with the children and young people's outcomes from a goals perspective. It's really important. Otherwise, what is the point of having outcomes if you're going to have no aspiration to try and achieve them? You'll see that the 3-year roadmap has been broken down into what we've referred to as building blocks. So those building blocks, just by way of summary, essentially illustrate the need to include inclusion across all of our educational settings. There's a real reason why Claire McLean is with us here today, as CEO of a multi-trust academy, multi-academy trust, because these are the folks, Claire is illustrative of the folks where this is happening, where this will be happening. So it will probably be interesting just to get a sense from Claire about how this feels from her perspective. You remember, we're talking about schools here in a major level. We talk about system leadership within the building blocks. Despite the fact that the collaboration, the partnership is stronger now than was ever the case before, that doesn't mean it's cracked. There is much more to do. And that's absolutely contained within one of the building blocks, building block 2. Building block 3, access to specialist support is obviously super important, and indeed local placements. There are plenty of members around here today who will talk about the need for local placements as opposed to children being placed far and wide. And unsurprisingly, building block 4 is all around inclusion and the relevance to culture and the relevance to behaviour. So broken down even more, perhaps the most helpful way I can explain it is the first year is very much about continuing with the foundation of this plan and the design of the plan. So please don't anyone read that plan and think, right, that's it, that's the plan and it will never change. That's the plan today. That's the approach today, which has been produced in a pretty fast time frame in the grand scheme of things. But as with all plans, as you begin to work through those plans, as you begin to implement those plans, it will evolve. All centre partnerships will evolve their plans over time, and that's really important because what you write on paper and what you think is the best way forward when you begin to put into practice is sometimes not the reality. So necessarily, it will evolve and adjust. And without preempting, Chair, your views going forward, and indeed members today at Overview and Scrutiny, I would not be surprised if Children's Scrutiny wanted to receive updates incrementally with regard to the progress of the SEN reform plan. Year 2 is very much about embedding it. Okay, so yes, there's some time to design further and fine-tune things, but let's not rest on our laurels. It needs to be embedded, it needs to be implemented, because in year 3, it needs to be delivering, and we need to be able to demonstrate that. So that's probably the most succinct way I can break it down in terms of year 1, year 2, year 3. I guess by way of summary, like I said at the beginning, I could talk for hours and hours about this and send everyone to sleep. It's a massive undertaking. And I'm just talking about producing the plan. You know, the real undertaking is in terms of delivering the plan, hence me saying what I latterly said. So maybe if I stop there and then open it up.
Thank you very much, Adam. I think at this point we'll go to questions. We have some questions already planned, and once we've got through those, then we will take questions from the floor. The first question is from Councillor Foster on capacity. Thank you.
Good morning, Chair. Thank you, Adam. As you know, I too can speak forever. So this will take quite a while. It won't take 45 minutes of everybody's time, but it's a very important issue. Okay, so the plans acknowledge the need to increase local special school capacity, particularly to reduce reliance on high-cost, independent and out-of-county placements. However, it seems the proposed approach is largely through targeted expansion of existing provision alongside growth in mainstream inclusion bases rather than special schools. So the current purchase of St Dunstan's for Regency High will certainly help increase the capacity, certainly help the situation. I understand the intake for this year coming is 16 to 24 children, but there's still a major shortfall in capacity in the Worcester catchment area, which stretches as far south as Evesham. I spoke to the head teacher of Fort Royal School yesterday, who runs an exceptional school for complex special needs children in Worcester. He consulted this year on 128 children who would like places at Fort Royal School, and he's taking 16 in reception. That's the magnitude of the problem. Fort Royal School used to take 250 children, but after a Ofsted DFE inspection, they had to reduce their intake number to 200, which is what it is today. And if you go around the school, and I've been around the school with Natalie McVeigh, who's here today. I've been around the school twice. It's difficult to swing a cat round there, let alone educate 200 children. So there was a submission to full council in February 2025 by Fort Royal governors to build a new school. It was entitled Spend to Save. It was presented by Governor Jade Bliss. She's still there today. I mentioned this, so this is not new. Those of you who've been in meetings I've attended at children's panels will have heard all this before many, many times. I mentioned this at the very first panel in June last year. Andrew will remember that. He asked questions and supported the proposal. So it was entitled Spend to Save, and it was presented by Governor Jade Bliss. The plan was to build a school twice the size of Fort Royal. That's 400. And then move Riverside, which I've been to, which is completely full on 2 split sites. Takes a small number of children, also doing a fantastic job for SEND provision in Worcestershire. having moved Riverside into Fort Royal, which would then give them capacity to expand, obviously Fort Royal would be moved into their new school to meet the need and demand where schools are overprescribed with no capacity to expand. At the moment...
If you'll excuse me, Councillor, do you have a question
yes,
for
coming,
Adam Johnson?
yes,
You've
it's
explained the context extremely well.
It's coming
but
very
it would be
shortly,
nice
Chair.
to get to the question.
It's
Thank
coming
you.
very shortly. Well, there's the context is relevant. The question, which is about capacity, is not relevant if there isn't the need and the demand. I need to set the context, which I'm doing. So at the moment, there are far too many children with part-time tables, plenty with no provision at all. No provision at all. My inbox, when I was Cabinet Member for Education, used to be full of requests from such parents of such children. And I've met with plenty of these parents at the parent carer forums across Worcestershire, run by Hazel and by Laura Jordan and others. Adam Johnson earlier in his initial outline confirmed we don't have the capacity in Worcestershire. Hazel Shaw, who is chair of the Parent Care Forum, will concur with this. The evidence for this capacity need is crystal clear. So here comes the question. And the question is to the Cabinet Member with responsibility for education. It isn't for the officers because they can do little about it given the finances of the Council. The question, given the background and the clear need and the shortfall in provision within Worcestershire to the Cabinet Member is what plans are there to build a new SEND school in Worcester to meet need? Thank you.
On the
Excuse
same
me,
subject,
Chair, could we have an answer from the Cabinet Member for Education?
I apologise, yes. Over to you, Dan.
First of all, I'd just like to thank Councillor Foster for keeping it brief. Secondly, it'd be really great to meet so I can see your notes on what you've done over the last 12 months to progress a new school within Worcestershire. It'd be really great to build on what you've done so far and actually see where you've gone from. In terms of special school capacity, I agree there is a reliance on out of county at the moment, but I also agree that we do need to get a balance between inclusive places in existing schools and special provision. And I think we remember the February Council meeting where we had an amendment from the Liberal Democrats about using existing buildings to see whether we can actually increase provision within our SEND provision, which we will be progressing. The proposed approach, we are looking at existing provision and mainstream inclusion to see what we can do to build on it. Personally, and I've been very clear on this, there are aspects of the white paper that I do not think will work. Any of us who were in education in 2014, where we actually had the last major shift, we saw huge problems in that shift because unfortunately there were repercussions that people didn't envisage. With this, I think that actually we can say one of the big problems is I think there might be an overpush to inclusion, and that's not because of the council, I think that's because of the government. And that is something that I personally were trying to make sure that young people get the right provision in the right place. But in terms of increasing capacity through new sites, that is going to require land, that is going to then require building. And at the moment, we do currently have a school actually that's in our budget, I think going at £63 million. So my first thing I'll say is, Councillor Foster, if you've got £63 million you're willing to donate, I'll happily take it off your hands and I'll happily start looking at building a school. But as we know, we've got to make sure that we work within our budgets. I've met Fort Royal several times. I would love to build them a new school. I was here in February 2025 when they came to discuss this, and I completely agree we do need to look at how we increase provision, and we need to make sure that they can actually do what they need to do for their young people. Now, I've been in post for 6 weeks. I'm currently in discussion with numerous schools, including Fort Royal. I've spoken to Regency at length, and they have great plans. They're already in the process of actually expanding out. And unfortunately for Adam, he's already got a series of meetings built in August, so he's going to be spending a lot of time with me, where we're going to be discussing this very issue. But I will say at the moment, the schools are where it's at. They're the ones who are going to be able to give us the means to start building and increasing provision. But at the moment, I'm not going to start predetermining and pre-guessing, because we need to get that 160 odd million from the government so we can start to settle the finances properly. We need to work with the schools to start increasing that provision. And if you think that I have any lack of ambition in this area, you're sadly mistaken. So I look forward to your email. I'll happily make sure we arrange that meeting. We can sit down, we can go through your plans over the last 12 months, and we can see where we can find common ground.
Thank you. The next question is also in capacity from Councillor Fordington. Thank you.
Good morning, all. I'm just going through the building blocks. I like the strategy of this, I must say, and the plan. I just want to have more in definition. I want to have more of scope of what's your plan and what's your proposal on how you're going to improve this. In my division, I actually have Chantry School, which I know obviously it is full. And of course, we've got a large waiting list. So could you kindly just inform me what's your plan on this, please? Thank you so much.
So, sorry, just so I fully understand the question. So, specific detail with regard to the plan for the building blocks with regard to that particular school or those schools?
Obviously I've got this. It's working. In my division, in Harlow division, I have Chantry School, so I would like to know about Chantry School and, of course, the plan itself as well for the children in Worcestershire.
So I've got the Assistant Director who's eager to respond. What I would say, just briefly, is remember what I said within the introduction. So what you have before you today, in terms of the papers, is the SEM reform plan with regard to the Worcestershire Partnership, which obviously has a huge educational relevance. What that can't do at this juncture is detail the specifics for each and every school. We could talk about the change programme. We could talk about work where we have been on the front foot, working alongside a relatively small cohort of schools, 30-odd schools, in terms of what can be put in place from a planning perspective, what can be implemented in order that inclusion genuinely be achieved with those schools. And that programme has been subject to national recognition, and it's something that we should be very proud of. But let's be equally clear that I'm talking about borderline a fraction of schools. And again, I think about the chair of the Parent Carer Forum to my left, who has been very clear and very fair and reminded us, okay, but you're also talking about a cohort of schools who were eager to be part of this. Not everyone is going to be in the same boat. So we're not in a position now where we can detail the specifics with regard to every school. And it goes back to when I broke down year 1, year 2, year 3. But by the point of year 2, we will have those plans with those schools, those specific schools, which is why I suggested, without trying to be presumptuous, I guess it just seemed logical that it feels inevitable that we will need to come back to overview and scrutiny on quite a frequent basis to provide updates as this plan comes into fruition. So that's what I wanted to say. I don't know, Sarah, do you want to add?
I'll just pick up on Councillor Fordington's question, and then I'm assuming that we'll go back to Daniela Carson to respond to Councillor Foster's question. Councillor Fordington's question around the Chantry's role in SEND reform and the school being oversubscribed are sort of the slightly two different matters. The Chantry School is a very popular school, Worcestershire. That's great. It's a good quality school, and families from Worcestershire and over into Herefordshire want their children to go there. It's an academy school, it's its own admissions authority, and it manages that demand. We also consider it to be an inclusive school. Just as a very brief update in terms of how the Chantry is involved with SEND reform, the head of the Chantry School is a regular attender of the Association of Secondary Head Teachers group, and we were at their annual conference yesterday where we had a specific session on SEND reform, and the head teacher followed up with a meeting afterwards with our officers in terms of some of her plans. So I would say the school is engaged, and I think that probably provides the latest update on the Chantry specific. But I will hand back to Daniela in terms of Councillor Foster's question around special school capacity in Worcester City.
Thank you. Just to give an update on where we're at this year in respect to special school places, particularly for our reception cohort. So that was something that came back last year and we continue to talk about, which was the high number of children awaiting a special school place for their reception year. And this year we find ourselves in quite a different position. So this time last year we had about 37 children that were awaiting to find out where they'd be going for their special school provision in September for reception year. And at the same time this year, we've only got 9 children that we haven't identified the special school place for reception. And part of that is the work we've done with our special schools in the capacity within some of those schools. Some of that is around the inclusion basis that we've started working on with, again, some of our primary schools. But also about identification of need and the inclusion agenda, really bringing that agenda up for our schools. We know that we have still in Worcestershire a higher number of children within special schools than the UK average, and we have to consider why that is and what we're doing to support more children to be educated in their local mainstream schools and not have to access out of county or specialist provision, because sometimes that has limitations for our children too. Different curriculum, different interactions, and the school setting is very different, often not in their own communities, so they lose those relationships too. So some really focused work around what does it mean to be in special school, who are the right children for our special schools, and what can our mainstream inclusion bases and or inclusion work do to increase the numbers of children that can access their local mainstream school.
Thank you very much. Do you have any further comment on that? Councillor Upton? Sorry, Foster. I'll get it right, yeah.
Only that the numbers Daniela mentions are not consistent with the conversation I had with head teacher Ed Francis yesterday. With respect, Chair.
I can just come back. So so you made reference to 128 consults, I think, with Fort Royal. There may have been 128 consults. I don't know how many there's been. Not all of those would have been appropriate for Fort Royal, so they would have declined a significant number of those. We also work with families to understand what's their local special school. So we have some families that want us to consult with multiple special schools because they know the difficulties there are in getting special school places. So one of those children may have actually, we may have consulted with 4 or 5 special schools, and they've been appropriately placed in their local special school. So all of those children, all 128 of those, won't have been appropriate for special school. They may not have been appropriate for that special school, but additionally to that, it may not have been their local, it may not have been the only special school we've consulted with for them. But I can categorically, we have 9 children currently awaiting reception places.
Thank you very much for that. Moving on to the next question, it's Councillor Upton. If you're ready, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everybody. I wish I hadn't asked this question because the more I think about it, the bigger the question gets. So I'll give it to Adam to begin with and see how we go from there. And I apologise and tell me to shut up if I do start waffling. I'm looking at the rationale behind this, and we know it's been driven by central government. The most extreme thing I've heard from about this is it's been driven by desperation, because they haven't got a clue. I mean, that's what I've heard on the radio. So my question is, And it is based on the fact that, you know, is it driven by desperation? My answer is yes. Rather than the established facts which we can control the cost rather than improve outcomes. Forced, not planned. This obviously puts a massive amount of pressure on us at a time we've got local government review. You know, we've got debt to begin with. How are you going to be able to handle this inside 3 years realistically, from the point of view that you've got to look and implement this? You've got to control the situation as it is already. You've got to identify costs, at the same time try and identify savings. I mean, realistically, how are you going to handle this in that period of time?
I enjoy my role as well. You've in your question, you've clearly highlighted a significant amount of risks and challenges, which we're all alive to. I could add to those. You know, when we talk about the SEND partnership, you know, I could talk to you about ICB transformation. I could talk to you about the fact that they have now become a cluster and joined with Warwickshire and Coventry, and they've lost a significant amount of staff. I could talk to you about Health and Care Trust, another significant partner, and some significant structural work that they're undertaking as well. Within all of this, remember as well that we've got parent carers who, you know, if you look at the papers that were submitted, that's not an easy read, is it? Let's be honest. It's certainly a meaty read. And again, that's just the plan. We've then got to do the doing, which I think is at the core of your question as well. But we've got to ensure that we are bringing along parent, carers, children, families with us, which means we've got to make sure that they understand this and they see it being delivered as well. So I guess what you're really asking is, have we got too much on to deliver this? In the ideal world, we wouldn't have so much on. Fact. So let's not pretend that that's not the case. However, from a capacity perspective, we have identified ourselves within the SEM reform plan that one of the key risks that we've been very loud and very clear to the DFE about, and I got no doubt whatsoever that we are not alone as a partnership in this, is the capacity issue. Capacity issue in terms of the amount of, and it's not just officers, individuals involved in doing this, but also capacity in the sense of, without getting into finite detail about the SEM reform plan, when you think about things like expert at hands, when you think about the associated monies to identify those individuals and then recruit those individuals. I've got folks behind me now who could wax lyrical about, yeah, that's lovely, it's quite a difficult task to actually achieve that in real terms, and we're only talking about Worcestershire. Remember, every other partnership is going to be doing this. So the answer is yes, it's incredibly challenging. Does that mean it's unachievable? No, I don't think it does mean it's unachievable. But does it mean that we have to, there's a massive relevance in terms of the monitoring and review of this as we begin to implement it. Not at year 3, as we are doing it, we have to do it. In terms of having this feedback back to central government via the DFE, because that's got to be continual. When we were producing the plan, the DFE were very much a component of this. So in as much as the plan has to be submitted to the DFE scrutinise the plan. The DFE essentially mark the homework and they tell us whether or not the plan has got through. But we involve the DFE in that process for good reason, basically. And as we are identifying the risks, which are clearly outlined within the maturity assessment and indeed the plan itself, we were articulating those to the DFE, who hear them loud and clear. And I think the other bit that's really relevant to this is when I referenced earlier Worcestershire's SEND improvement journey, that hasn't gone away. So we have We have had a SEND monitoring inspection. I'm not going to talk about that now because we're not in a position where we've got a published report. I've got no doubt next time we all gather that we'll certainly make reference to it, if not go into detail about that. But that improvement journey needs to continue. So the concerns that you raise within the context of your question are concerns that are raised within the context of SEND Improvement Executive Board. I made that title up. It's not called Improvement Board, but that we have an independent chair, and that's what the independent chair was appointed for in the first place. I'm mindful that I'm not an authority on this. So I understand the plan. I'm very much part of this plan. It's me who signs off the plan amongst other people. But we've also got folks in the room as well who I think could contribute quite meaningfully towards this, especially, and I don't want to put you on the spot, Claire, but in terms of, well, how does this feel? How achievable does this feel from an educational perspective? You know, what is the sense here and now? And maybe it might be worth hearing from Claire.
Thank you, because I did hear the word desperation, and I think there are desperate cases. There are children and families we've let down who are not attending school and don't feel that the school is for them, or they're not accessing the school that they want. But there's a lot of hope and aspiration as well. There's a lot of ingenuity in schools. There's a lot of things that we've done and examples in Worcestershire where we've seen this problem, and we know that the definition of madness is carrying on doing the same thing and imagining that it's just going to get magically better. So we have begun some innovation within schools, and there are children and families whose lives have been transformed by schools that have been prepared to take risks, to look at different practice and begin to think about how we can be different. For I suppose what is a larger and more noble aspiration to say, what sort of society do we want to live in? And surely we want to live in a society where every child feels that their local school is a school for them. And that's not to ignore that there will be some children with such complexities that they absolutely need the fantastic special schools that serve our system. But I've gone to Regency recently and I've spoken to the head teacher there, and we've both talked about children that are in her school that absolutely could have accessed mainstream provision had there been the mechanisms for us to talk more, be coordinated more in order to get the right thing for those children. So I think at the moment we're feeling like this is fiendishly complex. These plans that the local authorities have been made to put together under a very quick time frame are fiendishly complex, but leaders' responsibility is to actually make the complex feel simple. And I think that's the biggest next job, to make parents feel like we're working hard and we're reducing that complexity to get a system that absolutely can work for them and that fundamentally listens to them and makes them part of the design of that system. So I'm not sure, I think there is desperation that has perhaps led to the white paper and what's in there, and certainly schools are feeling under a lot of pressure, but we're imagining a future where actually there might be training and development for those schools so we can serve more children. And the experts at hand, I think, offers your constituencies, your an opportunity for us to develop a new workforce within education that it, is more evenly shared across schools and is better skilled. So there's a lot of hope and aspiration as well.
Sorry, can I just come back on that? Sorry, when I used the word desperation, that was, I think it was the political commentator, I can't be certain, but that was driven by desperation was pointed to the central government because of their lack of inability to sort it and to literally just throw it out and let everybody else sort it out. I think my points are down to three things. We have to deliver this, but you've got to identify, in my opinion, three things, and those are the things that have to be identified quickly, are the cost, the savings, and the disruption to the system. Because if you're 18 months down the line, 2 years down the line, and you can't see any savings, what's the point?
Can I respond quickly to that, just with one example? So at Tudor Grange Academy, Redditch, we recognised that there were children going from the autism base within the school to independent provisions that were costing over £100,000 a year for placements, and usually incurred travel costs as well. And we knew that with more adaptation, with a different provision that was both physical and had more specialist colleagues within our school, we were able to create a provision in liaison with the county council to ensure that those children stayed within the school, but within a different physical building, at a quarter of the cost. So immediately, we were making savings, and that provision now is a 45-place provision, and the children and the families in that provision had been battling for placements for a long time, and those families talk about their lives being transformed by that. Significant saving, and just one example of innovative practice going on.
Thank you very much.
Okay, sorry, again, to just come back on that. Just quickly, I mean, I'm not trying to besmirch this as being something that isn't worth doing. I fully support it, and it is worth doing. I think what concerns me is what central government expect. They're giving you £1 and saying, come back with a Rolls Royce. We have got to make sure we put pressure on central government to get the money to back this. Otherwise, we're just going to end up in a bigger hole.
So
I think we can all agree with that. Adam, I'm conscious that both the CMR and the finance officer want to butt in at this point. Perhaps we can come back to you in a minute. Phil, please come in.
Thank you. I just thought I'd just clarify the question. Obviously, this is a big plan in terms of going up and down the country around that, and everyone's been working hard to get their plans in by the 19th of June. And I think the government has recognised, which is helpful, that the funding of SEND is unsustainable. So hence why this high needs stability grant is on the table around that. And one of those mechanisms to get that high needs stability grant is a successful SEND reform plan, which we're discussing today. I think just to give you assurance, on behalf of the Society of County Treasurers, I meet with the government around this as well to make sure that we are making this sustainable as possible. But I can't, all members here would hear me speaking about high needs for the last sort of 4 or 5 years. This is the government, successive governments have kicked the can down the road and put it off the balance sheet, and it's no longer sustainable. So this is the start of the plan to make sure that gets back to being a sustainable way. Obviously, there's a number of questions around short, medium and long term, what the government going to do post-28 around this, because this is not going to go away, so we need a coherent plan. But you've got the assurance that everyone here is working really hard to do that. But there will be some savings and cost avoidance, but there's not a magic or silver bullet that will reduce the deficit to zero, and hence why government are putting through the amount of money. And for Worcestershire, we were in the Delivering Better Value plan, which was a really good programme that articulated that. We got £1 million grant. We're talking about a high needs stability grant just for 1 year of 162 million. That's the scale of, and you've got to replicate that up and down the country, that why this is a broken system, and the government are now trying to fix it. But as you are, the devil's in the detail, and there's a long way to go on that.
Thank you. Councillor Boatwright-Green.
Thank you, Chair. I've had a little bit of time to think about the word desperation, actually. And Councillor Upton, I probably would agree with you in many ways that this has felt reactive, I think would be a better way to describe it. But I would say that the entire system has been driven by desperation, because basically we were given the legal duty but not the actual money to do it. So this happened back in 2014, and anyone who's been in education over that period will say that basically we had to do it, but no one actually said how we were going to pay for it. So then as the can was kicked down the road, basically we had unintended consequences continually kicking in as DSGs came off budgets and money kind of was floating around in some kind of weird place where it existed but it didn't exist. And whether I like it or not, this government have said that can't happen anymore. Actually, what we need to do is get everything back onto the ledger and for things to start making sense. Where I do agree with them is that actually we do need to make sure we try to make this sustainable. And just for reference, we have opportunists who've entered the marketplace. And I've actually had meetings with people where they're saying we're planning on becoming £1 billion business by 2030. using our money to do that. And so when we're talking about placements of £100,000 a year, you can imagine how many young people they're bringing into that system. That is something I want to avoid because I know that we can do it better. So it's one of those where not only do I know that some private schools have their places, absolutely, NCW and Worcester are absolutely fantastic, and I would obviously want to keep working with them, but I also know others can see this as a way to prop up pension funds. So I can see where the government is coming from on this, but we need to get that DSG kind of under control. We also need to deal with the fact that parents are rightly frustrated by what's happened and those placements aren't there. We really need to deal with the unintended consequences and make sure that this continues and that we get this right. In many ways, I would say that actually the Ofsted inspection we had already put us on a journey, which has meant that we can weave that journey into what now happens next. Have I always fully agreed with it? No. Have my people to the left of me here had to deal with that? Yes. Will they continue to deal with it? Yes. But I will say that risk-taking in education has been held back, and a lot of people see risk-taking as something that shouldn't happen because obviously we should make everything stable. But risk-taking is also known as creativity. And so it's one of those where we do need to get more creative. We do need to think about what we're doing. I have to say what Claire's just been saying there is something that if I'd probably been in an educational centre that had that mindset, I'd probably still be in teaching today. And unfortunately, that wasn't there. We need to get that out into schools, and we need to try and help and support them in that way. So yes, there was some desperation in the system. I'm not entirely sure it was necessarily this government. I think it may have been across the board. But I think one of the things we need to do is start thinking, right, how do we get creative to make sure our young people get the best possible education? And that will be entirely my focus and how I'll be bugging this lot for as long as I'm in this role.
Thank you. The next question would come from Councillor Andrew Cross.
Thank you, thank you, Chair. I also had questions about capacity, about signs of distress such as unmet SEND need, and the, to throw in also the lack of budget for a new secondary school. So, we haven't got the easy win answers. We've got some complex problems. What's really become apparent, so yes, those questions have largely been covered already, but what has been apparent for a new member on the board, what's reassuring is seeing the compassion and diligence that is evident within the preparation of reports, but also the answers provided in 2 questions here as well. So that it's a really problematic thing. We can't just cut provision. You can't just reduce spending because that will increase costs further on. That's absolutely clear. So a lot of head scratching, a lot of thought and cross-party working, really necessary. So we've all got some knowledge here. We're absolutely facing a crisis in SEND, and a lot of work is ongoing. And so keep up the good work. Thank you very much. This has been really informative and encouraging thus far. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next question from Councillor Eacock.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Adam, for your report. I have 2 small questions, if that's okay. The first one is on page 32. Funding will also contribute to the development of target interventions and alternative pathways. Can you please define targeted interventions and advise how moving children, some children will probably have to move schools and travel within 60 minutes travelling time. How is that helping their development and well-being? The second part is on page 29, inheritance risks within a year without the grant. How will this affect the targeted interventions for children with special needs if they're going to move into mainstream school? Thank you.
Councillor Eacock, with the pages, have you got a paragraph number that you're referring to?
The first one is page 32.
The paragraph number. But But I can talk about targeted intervention if that helps. It's just helpful to see the paragraph you're referring to. If I talk about targeted intervention and the plans within the SEND reforms, that's about developing our consistent ability to be able to identify need in a child. That could be in a range of ways. It could be in terms of speech and language, it could be in terms of their physical needs, it could be in terms of a neurodivergent need, and to support that. That doesn't directly link to a child needing to move schools. A very significant part of the SEND reform plan, and really features in all of those building blocks, is about standardising some of the really good practice. Claire McLean just referred in her earlier comments, around the opportunity to develop the capacity and skills of school staff. That's one part of it, and we've done some of that work in Worcestershire already. We've been very fortunate, following on from the Delivering Better Value programme, to be part of the SEND and AP Change programme. That's allowed some testing of things that have come into the SEND reform plan. A good example of that is around improving approaches to neuro-inclusion in schools. So in terms of targeted interventions, schools having a standardised approach to be able to be equipped to intervene in an earlier way. That's what that refers to. But it doesn't that doesn't mean that children will have to move schools at all. In fact, if anything, that's a sort of prevention measure.
Thank you for that. We have some more questions, but I'm very conscious that we're already over time. So can I please ask that both questions and answers are as succinct as possible, or we'll be here far too long. Thank you. The next one, I'd like to invite Justin Bowen to speak. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. This area is one of particular interest to me, having worked in a SEND school and having a published practice guide on supporting children in schools with special needs. The key to this plan succeeding in the end, as it is for each individual SEND child, is how well their personal, their individual needs are assessed, the quality of the plan that's put together in terms of addressing those needs, and then the delivery of that support. So my question is very simple. Is there work being undertaken, if so, what is it, on developing a universal, mainstream assessment, planning and support tool that can remove the inconsistencies that plague our system?
So I'm mindful. You said succinct, which suits me. Ultimately, EHCPs are going to be replaced by individual support plans. Clues in the title, individual. Is there work that's going to be in place in terms of making sure that they're fit for purpose and they meet those individual needs? Yes. Are we in that place here and now? No. And I think it goes back to the update for future overview and scrutiny. Across the system, yes. Is that a succinct answer?
So in summary, the work isn't currently being undertaken to develop that tool, but the plan is that it will be.
Correct. Because, and it goes back to the SEND reform plan, year 1, year 2, year 3. Year 1, design and get that consistent application embedded for year 2.
Thank you. The next question, well, in fact, I'd like to invite Hazel Shaw to speak from her point of view. Thank you.
I just wanted to clarify that the outcome of the consultation hasn't been announced yet, and obviously parents do not want to lose their right to an EHCP and their children's rights that come with that. So I would challenge Adam to hold his horses on ISPs replacing EHCPs, because hopefully parents will have had the impact that we need.
Thank you very much. Next, we have Councillor McSweeney.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to ask a quick question. I'll make this as quick as I can on recruitment. I'm looking at, it's under section 6, what the local area partnership delivered in the first year, page 29 of our report pack. Under assumptions, all posts within the plan are recruited to and filled when inspected, and I'm seeing below that it's just a little bit of clarification on this. It says, without grant carry forward, requests being granted, lack of known funding amounts for future years, the likelihood of being able to recruit to specialist posts on limited fixed-term contracts is extremely low. I'm just looking for a bit of reassurance and clarification here, I'm thinking.
I think what you're reading out is a risk that we've identified ourselves within the context of the reform plan. So I'd like that assurance as well. I'm not in a position to give you that assurance now. We certainly illustrate that as a risk at this moment in time, which is not a defeatist comment, a risk, very different thing. It goes back to some of the earlier comments that Claire McLean made, just in terms of, in response to Councillor Upton's question, it's incredibly nuanced, it's incredibly challenging, it's incredibly complex. But there's real opportunity here as well. And whatever the motivation was, even if we're going to adopt a sceptical attitude, and I'm not going to comment on the politics, fortunately, that's not my role, but whatever the motivation was behind this, it doesn't detract from the fact that there's real opportunity here, and nor does it detract from the fact that to continue working in a way that wasn't working is clearly not an intelligent way forward. But I think you're asking a question for me to provide you with assurance. I can't. What we're providing you with is an identified risk that we'll do everything we can to mitigate on a local level. And as we begin to implement this plan, we'll report back, and essentially that report back will include commentary around whether or not our mitigations are successful. And if they're not successful, what are we going to do about that? That's what you need to hear from us.
Thank you very much. I'd like to invite now Debbie Lamar, the Director of Health Watch Worcestershire, and after that, Phil Rook, the Section 151 officer.
Thank you. Got just two quick questions. Was the plan co-produced from the outset or developed first and then consulted on? And are you able to give examples of where parent feedback has materially changed the plan? And then also, it's quite hard to see within it what families are actually going to see on the ground, what changes they'll see, and where are you setting that out clearly and how it will be measured?
In response to the question, has the plan been co-produced? The answer is no. It's that simple. We were involved in a number of projects representing families that have informed the plan, so the PINS project and the Change programme, and they have clearly had a huge impact on the contents of the plan, so it reads like the best bits of the PINS programme and the best bits of the Change programme, which we were involved in. But as we've been pushing very heavily to be more involved, and we would like to be more involved as I understand it, the plan going forward now is for us to get our feet under the table and iterate the plan. Are there things I want to change? Absolutely. Are the KPIs right? No, they're not. They don't represent families' lived experience, and they won't pick up on that lived experience. But we're willing and able and ready, and strategically I think there's an appetite to do that. I don't have any doubt about that. Operationally, we need to make it happen.
And if maybe just in terms of expanding on that, I'll go back to what I said earlier on as well. What you've got before you is the plan, but it's not the final plan. That plan will evolve. And remember, you know, we were given, there was a reason why, you know, I was trying to be as upfront and honest with folks as possible, basically. A really small amount of time go back to Councillor Upton's question in terms of the various challenges that are currently evident. I think everyone is familiar with that. From the point of publication of the white paper, the 23rd of February, to the point of submission to the DFE, June the 18th to be precise, is not a big window, especially for a partnership as a whole to look at this, and especially to produce what's being produced. And I concur entirely with Hazel's comments. There are elements, I gave examples where children's outcomes themselves align with the goals of the plan. That's not me in a camouflage way trying to suggest that the entirety of the plan was written alongside children and young people. It wasn't. But the co-production element, there are elements that we have tried to bring into the plan within the short timescale for delivery, and as that plan evolves, we will be doing that more and more and more. And again, the temptation to make reference to the recent SEND monitoring inspection is there, but I won't. We'll have that opportunity going forward. Co-production within the Worcestershire Partnership is significantly improved, but there will be no one here or anywhere who's ever going to turn around and say that we've cracked it. We've improved, but we've got to do so much more, and that will be evident as that plan, what's the term I'm using, evolves, develops over time, which is very much the focus of the first year.
Thank you. Anything else, Daniela?
Debbie.
Sorry. Debbie.
It was around the second question, actually, as to what changes will families see on the ground over the next couple of years, and how are you going to be measuring that?
I'll just give a couple of examples in terms of the expert at hands model. If I take actually the pins that the partnership in Euro Inclusion in Schools, of which we want to continue to roll out because it's been so successful, really, I think, as the first round has evidenced, really sees an improved partnership between families and schools. I think that's something that parents want and schools want and recognise that there's a need to develop, and sometimes that expertise doesn't just exist within the school. The Parent Carer Forum are a good organisation to support that. There's a proven track record over the testing period to do that. Another example would be in terms of the alternative provision outreach that we tested during the Send Change programme. Again, that's an expectation in Experts at Hand's guidance. That's the sort of thing that it's meant to roll out. We know now, and actually one of the schools in Clare's Trust really sort of grasped that opportunity over in Redditch. And from the feedback I've seen from parents, and Claire may speak to it in more detail, was that actually they could really see, one, their partnership with the school improving, but two, their ability to engage in their child's education and enable that child to transition and really have a sense of ambition and hope into the future, which for some of our children who find themselves at risk of exclusion in school or actually out of education, it was a really great support all round, including parents, to re-engage and to give that child hope, ambition and the support that they need.
That's very encouraging to hear. Thank you. Phil Rook, please.
Thank you, Chair. I was just going to respond to Councillor McSweeney's question about the risk about expert at hands, and Sarah's just touched on it as well. We pressed that with the government last week in terms of number of 151s at the head of MHCLG, because the grant has been announced headline for 3 years, but we've only got 1 year allocation. And the issue that we've got, if we want to plan and make sure we get the best use of this money and the biggest impact, we need to know that so we can plan, we can recruit the staff, which will help the system as a whole. So we'll keep pushing that agenda. But just to give you a bit further assurance that Adam couldn't give you at that point in time.
Thank you very much. We have a question from Councillor Miller. I'm conscious that we're a quarter of an hour over, so can we please make it very brief?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Question is, reading through, it's a tremendous paper to read through, but I would firstly like to thank the staff that dedicate their lives, and the problems they must take home at the end of the day must be very, very trying on how they are within their family life as well. So a big thank you to those professionals that are dealing with these problems from day to day. My question is that from the children we have with special needs, how do we associate, how do we compare to other county councils with this? And do we have a percentage of children that are in placement and in fostering, and indeed at home with their parents? Do we have that percentage? And so we can look at what the problems really are. The early intervention is a marvellous thing to do, but I've read through it and I think, are we going early enough? Should we be looking back at what happens to the child from the time they're born and with their families, to how they progress through nursery? And that the reason I ask this question is, for over 40 years now I've been involved with a children's group and Sunday school and things like that, and you can certainly see the difference between children with special needs from a placement family to a fostering family to a family that is all together, and also to a family where the family is working and the family is not working. Now, you must identify these problems, and how can we get involved at an early stage with basically parenting, I would say. That's my question, and that's from reading through this paper, that's what I've come back and asking myself those questions, and I don't know the answers, and so unfortunately I'm asking you.
That's okay. Unfortunately, we haven't got a huge amount of time, so I'm not going to be able to go into a massive amount of detail. Suffice to say, when we think about Best Start, when we think about family hubs, we think about the opportunities that gives us for early intervention. Public health sat behind me when I referenced them as being part of the partnership, absolutely part of the partnership for that very reason. It is about early intervention at that early inception. I think the other thing I referenced as well was people are sick to death of me saying it. I'm sick to death of me saying it, but it's so important, is the need to ensure we keep joining the dots up. So when we think about the Children's Wellbeing in Schools Bill, and we think about what's at the core of that recently passed legislation, that's about intervening as early as possible. It's about prevention, for all intents and purposes. So therefore we join the dots up with regard to SEND. You know, SEND shouldn't be seen as something over there and then the rest of the world is something over here. It's all interconnected. We're talking about human beings at the end of the day. And that is very much built on the premise of early intervention and the avoidance of escalation and the focus on individual need as well. I appreciate I'm giving you a very short answer. Do I agree with the concept of intervening as early as possible? Yes, I do, as do others. Are we building processes in to do that? Does the legislation enable us to do that? Yes, it does. And I suspect that will be something that we'll report on further at future overview and scrutiny as well, and indeed public health.
Thank you, Chairman. Could I possibly ask for the next one that we have some percentages where we can look at how other authorities are dealing with outside Worcestershire, and how we're dealing with children in placement and fostering?
Yeah, we have breakdowns. We absolutely have that existing data already. So in terms of the children and families that we're involved with in terms of where those children are. The majority are with their parents, their carers, but some of those children are not. We have that data, happy to share that data. We equally have comparative data, certainly with regard to the region, but also some national comparators as well. So happy to provide that information.
Thank you very much, Adam. One last thing from Hazel Shaw over there. Thank you.
Can I just, I'd be remiss if I didn't say something on behalf of families. I think we have to be careful of using the word problem because these children have additional needs and I don't think they're kind of problems. And also I'm slightly concerned that we're looking at parental blame when we're talking about parenting challenges around SEND. There's some national research that talks about how families of children with special educational needs are subject to parental blame from across the system, and we need to be really careful about how we position that. I'd also like to say that I worked with some really great professionals and some of them sat here, but also I think we need to thank families when we talk about thanking the professionals for their hard work. We also need to thank families where their children don't have a school and they've had to give up their employment and they're unable to earn an income because they have no school to go to. And, you know, I suppose I'm being a voice for families to say that, you know, these people get paid to do this job, whereas some families are actually losing their jobs because we're not providing schools. So I think it needs acknowledging.
Thank you very much. I'll take one more from Councillor McVeigh.
It's not a question, it's an explanation as to why I was shocked when you called me to speak at the start of the meeting, Chair, because it doesn't fall under my remit as Cabinet Member for Children and Families. It falls under the remit of my esteemed colleague, Councillor Boatwright Green, which is SEND and Education and Skills. So I just thought I ought to take the opportunity to explain my reaction earlier. Thank you.
That's fine. It's my first chairing, so I'm bound to get things wrong all the way along. So thank you all very much for attending. I'm sure that you would like to carry on much, much longer asking questions and getting the very good answers that we've had. But that's the end of that meeting, and you're welcome to stay or to leave as you wish. Thank you very much. I'd like to have a 5-minute break, if that's all right. If we can take our seats, we've still got plenty to get through. Thank you. Right, this is the Children and Young People in Public Health panel. So we'd like to receive an update on developments relating to children and young people in public health. And I would call first on Councillor Alan Bales to explain the situation.
Lisa then. Lisa.
Just introduce us.
Yeah. Chair, thank you for that, and that's very kind, but I'll hand over to the team if that's okay.
That's fine, yes.
Thank you. Yeah, Councillor Bells is our new cabinet member, and we're working him hard already, I promise. So firstly, thank you for letting us come. Obviously, this isn't our normal scrutiny panel, and it might seem a bit weird that me as an officer requested to come to a scrutiny panel, but well, I am weird, so as many of you know. But we do so much work in children's that we just wanted to take this panel's feedback and steer on the work that we're doing. Can I just introduce my gang? So working from the end, we've got Lucy Chick, who's our head of service for children 5 to 19s. She also has a mixed portfolio. She works on child death overview panel and also suicide prevention and a number of other things. So she's got a tough remit. Then we've got Claire Mitchell, who's our head of service for 0 to 5s and is doing a sterling job on our Best Start strategy at the moment, which features heavily in the paper. Then we've got Mr. Booth, Mr. Andy Booth, who is our head of service for safer communities. So he covers a whole range of things which often people don't really associate with public health, but everything from community safety, the Prevent programme, counter-radicalisation work, domestic abuse, and also youth services. Youth services isn't usually a function that public health do generally across councils, but in Worcestershire, it's public health that do the youth services. And also over there, we've got Sam Collison, who is our strategic programme manager. By the way, sorry, I'm Lisa McNally. I'm the Director of Public Health. Just in case you're wondering who the Scouser is, who's going on about everyone in public health. I'm not going to go through the report because I know you all have read it in detail and have memorised it. And I know we're short of time, Chair, so we might as well just jump straight to the questions. There's a very few bullet points. Best Start in Life programme is now in place, a new improved programme that covers everything from pregnancy, early years, around prevention, identification of need, reducing inequalities. Some major developments in the last year. Worcestershire Family Hubs programme, which I hope we'll talk about today, has been expanded. We've put an extra £250,000 into that in the last financial year alone. And contacts with parents and children, have gone from 40,000 to 50,000. It's an incredibly important service in the heart of communities, giving families early support, early help from people they trust in their community. We've also invested more money in health visitors. 170k extra went on top of the existing contract with a particular focus on supporting children with special educational needs and disabilities, 50k to expand our 2.5-year checks, a total of 220k went into our public health nursing. And as you know, in public health, and I really apologise to those panel members who are also on HOSC who might have heard a lot of this content, but we have a big focus on community development in public health. We're of the firm, uncompromising belief that the people who know best about what is needed to improve health and well-being are our residents, our families, children and young people themselves. So we've, in the last few years, we've put £1.2 million into small grants into our schools, into youth grants, and also about another £1 million into our priority neighbourhood development work on top of that, which focuses on our most deprived areas. And to finish off, apart from community development, our other focus is on deprivation, uncompromising focus on health inequity. Child poverty is rising in this country. Child poverty is rising in Worcestershire. Every district in Worcestershire in the last year of data saw an increase in relative child poverty. We should not scratch our head and wonder why children's health and well-being is struggling when the social circumstances in which they're growing up is declining. So you'll always see a sharp focus on giving those chances back to as many children as we can. I'll end there, Chair, and open it up to questions.
Thank you very much. The first question I have here is from Councillor Fordington.
I'm actually very pleased to be the first person, actually, and I want to thank personally to Lisa McNally for all the outstanding work your team has done. It is something else, and I've been through the HOSC panel myself and on children and families, and I must say you're incredible. Your team is incredible. I want to be able to sort of highlight the points you've actually made in smoking, first of all. It's been something that which has really touched my heart, and I wanted to sort of say thank you to you for that and the team. My concern is obviously poverty. So we're looking into hungry children. Funny enough, I was talking to my daughter this morning, and she turned around and sort of said she teaches, and she sort of said one of the children would come in with rumbling bellies. So of course that's really disturbing to actually hear that. How can we engage? How can we improve this in ensuring that this is actually something that we are able to meet and deliver as councillors ourselves as well? And what can we engage to make this become a better environment for our children in school? And what can we do to put this right? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fordington, for both your kind words about our team and your advocacy for the most vulnerable groups, especially children. Absolutely right on the smoking. In the last year, hot off the press actually, we haven't released this data yet, but in a couple of years ago, in 23-24, there were 413 women in Worcestershire still smoking throughout their pregnancy. The latest data hot off the press is that we've halved that to 150. I particularly want to shout out to Claire Mitchell to my left, who has worked so hard with our public health midwives. And of course, a big shout out to the women who have quit smoking. So easy, isn't it, to assume that it's easy to quit smoking just because you're pregnant? It's not. It's an addiction. It's a powerful addiction. Every woman who has managed to quit when she got pregnant has my deepest admiration. In terms, I think Councillor Fordington's absolutely right to raise food and food poverty, food insecurity. It's a major driver of inequality in a range of outcomes, including health and educational benefits. We've delivered a whole wide range of grants to enable organisations to deliver breakfast clubs. We've got the grants into schools to support them to address food insecurity. And also, of course, we have to remember, it's about food, but it's about healthy food as well. That's important for health and well-being and educational attainment. So we've also got our Chefs in Schools programme at the moment, which is helping schools provide not just an adequate diet for our children, but for a healthy and nutritious diet, which will fuel not just their bodies, but their brains as they learn. Is there anything else, colleagues, on that?
Just on the addition to schools, as Lisa said, we've just funded a Chefs in Schools course. So we've initially funded it and we've had some really, really great feedback. So we're looking to do some more of those to get that rolled out to more schools across Worcestershire. We are expecting new school food standards to come in sort of September time. So we'll be gearing up for those as well. But it's not just about school settings, it's about early year settings and other places. So again, Claire and I work incredibly closely together and we'll be looking at how we support early year settings, childminders, etc., in responding to some of the sort of changes that we're expecting nationally. But also, as Lisa said, with regards to poverty and support, we know our family hubs offer a lot of support to very young families when they're first starting out, with how we ensure they're accessing vouchers and accessing those sources of support. So it's a whole range of things. No one thing will make the one change, but it's how we look at everything wrapped around that, and that includes advertising and standards and other things. So yeah, a huge amount of work in those spaces.
I just wanted to add, I think I mentioned it at the last scrutiny panel, but one of the key things that we're really trying to focus on in terms of food poverty is the Healthy Start programme. So for those that aren't aware, this is a programme that provides low-income families, either if you're pregnant or have a child under 4, with a card that you can spend at the supermarket with money added every week to spend on healthy food. We know that only about 2/3 of our families, our low-income families, are signing up to this. This is locally and nationally. So we have had a real push locally with webinars and information and comms. We're just about to do a campaign push at the moment to ensure that all our families that are eligible for the Healthy Start programme are signing up to it, because we know that around about 1/3 of our low-income families aren't. And with a rough case study, if we did have a family that had a 10-month-old, a 3-year-old, and the mum was pregnant, for example, then they're missing out on £74 every month of free money effectively to use at any supermarket on healthy food, healthy vegetables. And that could be tinned, frozen, anything. So we can really support those living on a budget and struggling to kind of live with fresh food as well. So there's a lot of money that we can access our families that we're not claiming at the moment. So any support to ensure that families you're working with are signed up to the Healthy Start programme. Also vitamins they can receive at their family hub. So ensure that they are signposted if they're not aware.
Thank you very much. Councillor Upton, you have a question.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the report. It's a very interesting read. A question, page 97, paragraph 11, good level of development. In Worcestershire, 68% of reception-age children achieve a good level of development in 2025. So that really means that 32% aren't. Is there a reason that figure is so high? It seems to be the national average, but have we identified the reason?
Such an important question, and such a complex question as well. If I was to draw a diagram of all the different factors that influence a good level of development, it would take me all afternoon. And it's everything from, I think, firstly, poverty. Some children live in deprived circumstances, which affects their deprivation. I think it's about education and what our early years and schools can provide. And unless we address this, and it's also about health and early health care for children as well. Unless we work on this as a priority, as a system-wide issue, then we're not going to address it. Yes, our good levels of development are similar to the national average, but actually what is concerning, I think, is the inequality in good levels of development. And I was talking to Councillor Bales about that earlier. Do you want to come in on that, Councillor Bales?
Yes, thank you, Lisa, and thank you for that, and thank you for the questions. They're all important, and we take them in that. And just talking to the team here and the brilliant team which I've got around me, which I've just found out, and I'm on a steep learning curve, so there we are. But I certainly would like to reassure the panel here that one of the key factors in all the work we do here in this one is inequality. We can never fix this education system or even the health system or the whole economy while the significant proportions of our children are growing up in relative poverty. And the good work that Lisa has said, we can see this in the data on good levels of children's development, where the indication is that the rates in good level children's development is lower mostly in our deprived areas. And certainly, having spoken with Lucy again, we've agreed that the priority needs to be to focus on these children with the least life chances and work hard to give them these chances. If we do that, it won't be just to their benefits, but it will be to all our benefits. So thank you for that, Lisa, and I think that's sort of set our scene, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that sets the scene. And if I can, Chair, I'd like to hand over to Claire Mitchell, who can provide Councillor Upton with more detail on exactly what, I was going to say we plan to do, but it's actually working with a wide range of partners, some of which are sat right in front of me in the shape of Sarah and Adam there.
Yeah, there's a huge programme of work that has been started around 6 or 9 months ago in conjunction with the National Best Start grant. So we know with the National Best Start strategy, the key outcome that we're trying to achieve with all of the work that we're doing system-wide is our GLD data. So we have got local targets as well as the national targets. And to achieve that, we've taken the mention with inequality sets the scene really with what we've been working system-wide to do. We've been taking a data-led approach to dive really deep into our GLD data, not just to look at which districts might be high or which general kind of groups of children and families might be higher or lower, but working on an individual school level to understand which specific schools are higher or lower in which of the indicators, looking at our LSOAs, looking at our sizes of schools and our variations between each of the indicators to understand what our kind of package of support could be. That's led on to quite a robust work programme that has been developed by Sarah and her team, looking at 3 levels of support. So there's a vast programme of work which is looking at universal support for all settings, a targeted level of that work programme which is looking at identifying from the data 45 schools that we're going to do some really bespoke work with, and then that top tier of some really specific work happening with some schools that have particular needs and particular work programmes that the improvement advisors are working quite closely with. We had an event last week with probably, I'd say, around about 100 settings attended. There was so much enthusiasm in the room for the work programme that has already started over the last few months and the buy-in to what's been happening in the schools and settings already. So we're really excited to see how that will improve our data over the next few years and really start to reduce those inequalities going forward.
Thank you very much. Next question is from... supplementary.
Yeah, please. Yeah, thank you for those answers. They are interesting. Just as an afterthought on this, obviously the 32% that are identified as not having good levels of development at reception age. And then just moving on quickly to page 103, paragraph 48, suicide prevention team. Pupils at risk of suicide. At what age does that get identified where there is a risk of suicide? Does that occur in reception children, or is that something that happens? And this is really a correlation between that from the point of view that if they're deprived and they don't develop at reception age, do they then go on to become a data that is identified as being potentially suicidal?
Yeah, Councillor Upton. So 2 important questions. I think suicidal ideation, thoughts of suicide are thankfully quite rare amongst young children. Certainly we do see, upsettingly young children self-harming in some cases, but suicide risk rises with age in terms of children and young people. And I think you've hit on an absolutely crucial point about mental distress, trauma, and how that affects suicide, often a bit later in life. Yes, there is a link between suicide and socioeconomic deprivation. That's because growing up in relative poverty is a trauma. It's traumatic. And it reduces your chances to be able to engage in a good standard of education. It affects every aspect of your life. And so, yeah, you're absolutely right, and to make that link, and it's an important link to make. But at reception age, no, thankfully. I think we see mental health problems developing at that age, but thankfully not usually suicide. That would be very rare.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now a question from Councillor Andrew Cross.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much also for coming to this panel and giving this. I mean, there's a lot of joined up aspects that otherwise could be considered in isolation. And just earlier we were talking about school provision and sufficiency, and a question that arises or has arisen with residents recently is about travel time to school. Parents living in Warnwood villages, for example, saying their children having to go to Malvern or Droitwich to school, and so travel times. Are we monitoring? Do you see decreases in physical activity and healthy lifestyles because of an hour spent in a bus, for example? I would also wonder how the role of, within ENI and highways about active travel, how that can help address that, and so that one could, kids could be getting exercise whilst actually getting to school and less congestion around the school site, rather than being driven or relying on a bus. And I'm wondering also whether that also feeds into attendance rates. I note there's a disparity between pupils with the HCP and the overall attendance rates, and the effectiveness of SEN support in boosting attendance of pupils with SEN. So I have one other question on a separate topic, but just wondering about particularly the finite number of hours in the day and capacity and life strength for coping with getting to school that's more remote and not having the neighbourhood feeling as well, and splitting from friends.
Thanks, Councillor Cross. And I think all those things come together to have an impact. Active travel is one of the most beneficial things that we can get children and young people doing. But of course, there's a limit. You can't expect a 8-year-old to cycle 12 miles to school. And there is research that we reviewed recently looking at the cut-off about how long is it that a young person would feasibly be able to travel actively to school. And if it's longer than sort of 15, 20 minutes or so, it starts to become less and less likely. And so, yes, of course, and sitting on a bus does not bring the same health benefits, quite clearly. As you said also, that time taking up is less time in your community, becoming part of that community. And as I said earlier, we're big believers in the importance of community life for child's development. On active travel, we're big supporters of it. So just, I could reel off dozens of examples. I won't for the interest of time, but we support Bike Worcester with the bike buses, which are obviously, and I know they happen elsewhere, like in Malvern. I had to say that because Natalie was looking at me. And we also, I would say about a good 40% of the hundreds and hundreds of school grants that we've given to schools have been spent by the school staff on physical activity. One of my favourites was the balance bikes. You know, when I learned to ride a bike, they put these stupid stabilizers on and you were sort of leaning on one side, not really learning. Now they take the pedals off, give you a crash helmet and some arm pads, and you run along while sat on the bike. And it's such a joy to watch these kids tearing round on these balance bikes, naturally picking up their feet and suddenly finding that balance. And then the next step, what other schools have done cycling proficiency stuff to get kids confident actually out on the open road and setting that lifelong habit for active travel. It's a big, big thing that we need to promote, as well as physical activity and sport in general. I could talk about swimming, I could talk about all sorts of stuff we're supporting, but I know we've got other questions, Chair, so...
Thank you very much. Next question from Sue Eacock. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Lisa, for your excellent report and also for all the work that you do. And well done on winning your award. Well deserved. My question is on homeschooling children. How is public health monitoring these children to make sure they're not slipping through the net, not only their educational needs, but also their health, mental health, self-harming, illness, etc. We know during the COVID pandemic, children really suffered being homeschooled. How are these children being monitored for their health, fitness, activities too? Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Eacock. Really important question, and what I will do is nod over to my colleagues in front of me for a more detailed answer on that particular group. But you're right to raise it. You know, we do see, of course, a higher risk potentially, and I say potentially, of homeschooled children in terms of social isolation. And obviously, I would say from a public health point of view, that needs to be mitigated against. Kids need to be around lots of other kids and interacting with their community, which of course includes the school. We don't specifically have data in public health anyway on, for example, physical activity rates of homeschooled children. But what we do is make sure that we reach far into communities. So, for example, and it's good that you've raised this, yes, we give grants to schools, but we also give grants to organisations in the heart of communities that might have more reach to homeschool children. But if it's okay, if I pass forward a little bit for more detailed on health monitoring and wellbeing monitoring of homeschooling.
So I take that. I'll take that. So children who are electively home educated, or homeschooling as you've described it, we do have to remember that that is a parental right and a parental choice. There is actually quite a strong collective group of parents in Worcestershire as home educators who will actively defend their right to educate their children at home. So the local authority actually, in terms of interference in that, has a very, as it is nationally, has a very, very limited role. The expectation is that we monitor for suitability of education. So there is a limit to how much you get involved. That said, we do know also that there are parents who feel compelled because of their poor experience with statutory education, that they felt the need to do that, and they actually want more services. And in that way, we work with that community to make sure that they've got access to the support they need. I think one of the when we're working with our Health and Care Trust, and particularly those particular points of child health monitoring, our NHS Trust will be very conscious of the electively home educated community and make sure with their best endeavours that those families have access to the information in order that they are not missing out on health, on important health monitoring or screening events, including, vaccinations as well. But in terms of actually having a responsibility, any statutory agency of monitoring child's health as a result of home education, that is not, there is no powers to do that.
Thank you for that question and the answer as well. Can we have Councillor McSweeney, please?
Thank you, Chair, and welcome to the Public Health Panel. I say, sitting on HOSC, I don't mind at all hearing it all again, and I would just in passing mention, Sue, thank you for mentioning to the award you've recently got. I've just mentioned it is relating to mental health, and very, very well done for that. It kind of comes into what I was going to say. Apologies, Chair, I'm going to try not to make a huge long speech here, but I suspect people in the room will appreciate this is something I'm very, very passionate about. Talking about physical activity, I first got a very, very brief one, just sort of looking at the inequality here. And the variation across areas, sort of like in terms of physical activity. Do we have any data on progress on that, how that is changing? Are we making inroads to that, or is it getting worse? Just looking at, I mentioned mental health, physical activity. This is a bit of a point I'm making rather than a question. Apologies, Chair. Just wanted to mention very much the crossover between those two. Outside here, I work as a climbing instructor. I see a lot of people, sort of neurodivergents, people with mental health problems. It's something I see a lot of this. I also work with children who come in. I should mention I have occasionally I've had sort of like homeschooled children. We get those coming in, sort of doing their physical activity, and the children who are outside mainstream education, and there is this benefit for mental health for doing this physical activity. However, I wanted to just sort of build on what Andrew's asking about active travel. Sort of thank you very much for that. You stole a bit of my thunder there, but that's very useful. We mentioned bike buses. I say the sort of bike busing more we do, the school we do to the head there is also head of a school in my area out in Lysington, and I know he's very keen to encourage active travel. It's not an issue of distance. I mean, a lot of the children are coming from fairly close by. The issue is safety, road safety, crossing. There's difficult road crossings. It's difficult to get this. So I'm coming on to a question here. The question is it possible for the public health team to, again, it's about crossover, can we have some integration between public health and highways? Can we get, I'm thinking this is a much bigger question for them, for this committee, about actually having some public health input into highways policy fundamentally. And I think if you want to come to another different scrutiny meeting, we're talking about active travel at my environment committee on Monday, but I'm trying to think about how to invite you to it at a future date. But anyway, I think there was a question there somewhere. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Councillor McSweeney. And yeah, actually, we'd love to come to the Environment Scrutiny Committee because there is a lot of crossover, as your question illustrates. We can encourage people to get active as much as we like, but if they do not feel safe cycling on the roads, for example, then that's always going to be an uphill struggle to get activity levels up. Children's activity is generally increasing across the county. However, there are some areas where we're still nowhere near happy with progress. One of those would be Redditch, which is why we're investing so much community development work and resource into that area. In terms of interaction with highways, absolutely. I like to think that public health is one of those areas that sits at the intersection of so many council functions. You know, I barely go a couple of days without being in a meeting with Adam, which I'm sure he's delighted about, and Mark, and also Rachel in E&I. So to give you some examples of how we're working, we put funding into road safety from public health. We've also just put some extra funding into rights of way to help the rights of way team open up more footpaths, cycleways, etc., because we know a lot of people feel safer with that. So yeah, absolutely, we work with economy and infrastructure as much as we can, with a view to, as you said, active travel and increasing active travel. And we also work with the district councils on that as well. Another issue for us, of course, is air quality. And, you know, if we're going to encourage people to be active travellers, we need to also monitor air quality as well. So we've done a lot of work with the district councils on that as well. So a whole package of work, and I think we can always do more.
Thank you very much, Lisa. Moving on now to Councillor Upton. You have another question.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, go back to Lisa, your comments on activity, physical activity. I'll ask the question first and then give you the reasoning behind the question afterwards, otherwise I'll be accused of waffling. What plans as a county council, as district councils, I know we're not a district council, as county councils, do we have to do the thing that helps children be physically fit, mentally fit, by introducing things back into society, into communities, like football pitches, cricket pitches, ponds, go fishing, tennis courts, pitch and putt, swings, 9-hole golfing. These are the things. When I lived in Birmingham in the 60s, we couldn't walk out the house without playing tennis or going playing cricket. And in the mid-1970s, all this was lost. It disappeared. And then all there are now are just empty grass areas. Nothing happens except crime, antisocial behaviour. So isn't part of the answer to this that we look at introducing what we destroyed back in the 70s and just get kids out there doing what they want to do with a ball? How much does a football cost? £4, £5? You know, it doesn't cost millions of pounds to correct these situations. It just is a bit more thinking about what kept us fit then that doesn't keep us fit now.
As far as I'm concerned, you can make a speech as long as you like on that, Councillor Upton, because I passionately agree, and so do my team. You know, the nature of public health is changing, I think. Certainly it is in Worcestershire. We're trying to lead the way on this. To put things in sort of old-fashioned medical terms, less and less we're seeing our patient, if you like, as the individual. More and more we see our patient or the focus of what we want to help improve is the place in which people are born into, grow into, parent in, live, work and love. And some of the things you listed are absolutely the building blocks of public health. So we use, as I said, we've put millions of pounds over the last 3 years into community grants where we allow areas to choose how they spend that money, and they often will choose to spend it on the things that you talked about. So redeveloping a green space so it's more usable for the community again, opening up nature trails, setting up bike repair shops that people so that they can cycle around the area more. And it is, I hate this phrase, I can't believe I'm going to use it, but it is about back to basics. It's about the environment. The single biggest predictor of everyone's health in this room is where you live. it accounts for well over 60% of the variance in our health outcomes. It does beg the question, and I'll say this for Phil's benefit, if local authorities are responsible for the factors that determine 80% of our health, we know that only 20% of health outcomes are determined by clinical care. The rest of it is determined by social factors, including the environmental factors you talked about, Councillor Upton. So how can we have a neighbourhood health programme, for example, when local authorities are in a financial headlock? So, you know, we're not going to improve health until we are able to invest properly in exactly the environments and the settings in which people live and create healthy places. Because if we create healthy places, we get healthy people.
Yes, I just come back and let you, I mean, correct. And to me, the simple answer is that if you invest on things that make people healthy, you save on public health.
Thank you very much for that. You have a question from Councillor Cross.
Thank you, Chair. Please could you help me understand better the graph relating to young people not in education, employment or training on page 117. There's an outlier in Q2 SEPT of 3480 versus 680 or so. The number of unknown NEET. And also, I'm slightly puzzled by the axis, the x-axis being a yearly number for the first four, and then Q1, Q2, Q3, Q4, and also the inclusion of that number. So it is really puzzling. And then also relating to NEET, on the following page, page 118, that Worcester City has the highest proportion of young people not in education, employment or training.
Excuse me, Councillor. It's been pointed out to me that that's the next section of...
Sorry.
Not
I'll
this
pause.
topic.
Thank you.
So thank you for that. And the next question is from Councillor Fordington.
I think you're running before walking. Okay, really, I've just been sitting here thinking about how can we move the things forward for the children which are sitting on the bus. So I came up with learning on the bus or learning on the move. And I feel that we can engage into activities while these children are on the bus. They're sitting there for an hour, looking at their phones or whatever else they're doing. So I felt that they need to have education delivered to them whilst they're on the bus, so they don't get bored. So I feel that we need to have principles put in place, for example, obviously knowledge, joyful games, fundamental areas where they can feel that they are actually learning whilst they are moving. So I think that we need to put some system in place for all buses which are travelling, and therefore the children are feeling enthusiastic as soon as they come into school, because otherwise that tiresome game comes into action. Because, you know, when you're looking at children on the bus, when you've got like 50 to 60 miles which they're travelling, straight away when they get into classroom, they're tired. So when they've already been engaging, of course it's going to make them feel inspired, and also maybe perhaps even offering them some kind of snack at the same time, to offering them a breakfast of an area where they can actually eat. So that's what my suggestion is. I hope we can take some actions with this. Thank you.
So this is why I weirdly like scrutiny panels, because I always come out with good ideas, and I think that's an absolute belter. That is absolutely something I think we should be able to do. We could talk to the transport providers, we could talk to the voluntary sector. I love the idea about providing some resources from public health to help make that journey to school on the bus a healthy, potentially developing experience. So let's do it, shall we? Let's watch this space and let's make it happen. We can absolutely do that.
I would love to take part with this activity, please. Thank you. From education, I'm a very key element of making sure that children get into school engaging. Learning is fundamental. That's the only way we can have our generation progress forward. Thank you, Lisa. Highly appreciate that.
Thank you very much. Sarah, you'd like to say something?
Yeah, just quickly on breakfast clubs, and Councillor Fordington raised it earlier, around children being hungry on arrival at school. I don't know of any of our schools that don't, in some form, monitor and provide food for children. It will vary in different ways, including schools that provide food banks for families as well. And the colleagues will also be aware that the DFE launched over the last 12 to 18 months the ambition to roll out access to breakfast for all primary age children, and they've targeted certain schools in Worcestershire that would serve particular communities, and there's been quite a good take-up of that. So that is an area of work. Schools will always they will always say they'd like more help with it, but I think that is something that schools are responding to.
Thank you very much for that clarification. And the next question comes from Councillor McVeigh.
It's not really a question, it's just a few comments to try and consolidate what's already been said, and just reflection on the really interesting discussion that we've had. So we know that early intervention and prevention are effective ways of dealing with a multitude of issues, not least health outcomes. So I'd like to put on record my thanks to Lisa and the public health team for their investment in the lives of children, young people and families. There is a really strong and valued relationship between children's services and public health, from the emerging Best Start to family hubs, supporting healthy pregnancy to school readiness and to youth work. Worcestershire's children and young people benefit from public health funding, as we've heard, and expertise and strategic external relationships, which mean that we've got every chance of narrowing the inequalities that Lisa and the team have talked about today, and giving children and young people the chance to thrive throughout their lives into adulthood. In relation to the public realm, some people might not know that public health fund libraries. So I've been missing out on an opportunity here, because we've talked a little bit about good levels of development earlier in the meeting, to say that the Summer Reading Challenge launches on Saturday. And it's a great opportunity for children aged 4 and upwards to participate. And the theme is Read to the Beat, inspiring children to explore the connection between stories and song, both of which ignite imagination and creativity. So in relation to good levels of development, it's a really good way for those children in the six-week holiday to maintain their levels of reading and also improve their levels of reading ready for the next school year. And there are rewards and incentives. Children just need to read 6 library books. There's volunteering opportunities for young people. So again, around the ways of well-being or ways to well-being, volunteering is key in that. So young people can volunteer in libraries to support the Summer Reading Challenge. But I'm just really excited around the priorities around child development, healthy weight and nutrition, immunisation, mental health and priority neighbourhoods, and really look forward to continuing to work together across Directorate. Thank you for the opportunity to just say all of that.
Thank you very much. Councillor Beautrat-Green.
Thank you, Chair, and you've just reminded me that I have been challenged by the good children of, or young people of Pershore, to read a book this year, and I've got to do it before the actual medal ceremony. So I've got 2 sat there. I'll see if I can get one done. I'm just really bad at dyslexia, bad reading. No excuse. I was just basically just thinking about, there's a lot of discussion around young people and kind of I think quite often the misunderstanding of kind of when they're out and about, and this kind of natural leaning that seems to happen towards this idea that is antisocial behaviour. The reason I mention this is I'm really excited. Over the past 6 years in Pershore, we've actually managed to get the zip wire finally built, because I was lobbied probably most heavily by the young people to get that done. If you haven't pulled a muscle on a zip wire, you're not doing it right, so it's definitely physical activity. Also, we've now got a trim trail down by the river as well, and again, if you actually go down there, you will see a lot of young people engaging with these things. Is there an opportunity, especially bearing in mind there's 106 money that's available for kind of getting kind of things on site? But I do sometimes look at kind of planning applications and think, why are there not trim trails on these new estates? Is there a way for us to work together to get these things built? Because actually, I do want a zip wire everywhere, just naturally, because I just want to go about my life on a zip wire. But also, these trim trails are absolutely loved, especially by kind of young people and teenagers, and they actually do use them.
Absolutely. I mean, speaking my language there, you know, I'm not an expert on Section 106 money, etc. Yeah, definitely zip wires. I'm a big fan. I've done that big one in North Wales. Absolutely loved it. So yes, we would love to look into that and take some expertise from colleagues and members across the council, including my own cabinet member now, who knows a lot more about things like Section 106 than I do, to join forces on that. And also, you know, things like trim trails. But public health is also able to fund those things from the public health grant. I feel a zip wire coming on, actually, maybe from Wildwood down to the car park. But we just... yeah, but as I said, in response to Councillor Upton's question, public health is increasingly about the environment, and we want to focus on that, and we can use public health grant funds for capital projects to improve the healthiness of the environment. So absolutely 106 money, definitely, but also let's explore use of the public health grant as well and create something awesome in the places where it's really needed.
Thank you. Councillor Beauchard Green.
So we've got Nunnery Wood, Worcester Sixth Form College, then we've got the car parks, then we've got the... I'm just seeing a series. The hospital. I'm seeing a series here that we could get going. I'm just saying this actually could be a way to get young people very, very eager and healthy. So I'm totally on board with this concept.
Chair, I'll do that if Councillor Boatwright Green agrees to run the Withall run next year with us.
I promise I will actually run it as long as I don't break my foot. Unfortunately, I tried to do 5k the week before and I wasn't quite ready. But I will definitely do it, and I am aiming to do 10k. And also, Wychavon Games are coming up, and I am actually running the 5k for my village, so it's going to be quite entertaining.
All right, you heard it first here, and we'll hold you to it. Thank you. So, unless anyone has any further questions... Councillor Fordington.
I heard something which was something inspiring to me. Public funds, what was it? Public health funds? So I've actually got a concern for a playground in Harlow, actually. And I was wondering how to go and improve this playground. And I was just trying to reach out on where do I need to go, and I just wanted to have some confirmation of this. Because this year, my division of funds, I'm looking into improving children playing areas into social grounds as in such. So if you could kindly point the direction to me which way I need to go, I would appreciate that very much. Thank you.
Absolutely, Councillor Fordington. Public health grants have been used to do all sorts of things in play areas and playgrounds, forest schools, new equipment in playgrounds, improvements, so absolutely.
Thank you very much. We have one question from Councillor Cross, and then I'm aware that Councillor Bells would like to sum up. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'll have a second go. Same topic, but worded differently. We spoke about healthy, that public health being at the intersect of lots of council work, and that healthy places lead to healthy people, the value of education. And I'm seeing in another part of the report, the agenda pack for today, the apparent higher proportion in Worcester City of young people not in education, employment or training. And I'm just wondering what public health monitoring and action is being taken about this issue in Worcester. Thank you.
So I'll also potentially pass on to colleagues, because I'm just aware you're only hearing from me, and which must be awful. So first of all, we're working with Judy Gibbs' team on skills. She's doing the most amazing work, I think, on skills in the county. And so we are working with her and investing in grants in that area. We invest public health grant money into children's, into education as well. And also, of course, we invest a lot in youth services, which can often be helpful to pick up young people who are maybe not in education or training. So I might ask Andy to say a little bit about what our youth services are doing there. But Councillor Cross raises such a big issue. We do find sometimes young people end up maybe disengaged from society. They're labelled as neat, but behind that label is a lot of challenge which can affect them for the rest of their lives. So I'll pass on to Andy, potentially Lucy, and any other colleagues who want to come in.
Thanks, Lisa. We talk in the paper about our youth service offer. So a big part of the youth work, the way it's placed, is it really helps the social and emotional development of young people. And although it's a universal offer, they are primarily targeted in our most deprived areas. So more than 1,000 young people attend our youth service provision every month, and around half of those are from our most deprived areas, so from our young people who are potentially most at risk of becoming NEET. What that gives us is a real opportunity to support those young people, to support that emotional and social development, to support that physical health and mental health improvement stuff that we've talked about already. And youth workers are incredibly skilled and incredibly able to have that conversation with young people that potentially other services aren't able to. The relationship between a youth worker and a young person is very different. The ability to build rapport over a long period of time, they're incredibly skilled and incredibly able to coach and support people to hopefully steer them away from risky behaviours and from becoming NEET. So we invest really heavily in that. So we spend around £500,000 on our youth work provision. We're really fortunate to have a really buoyant and well-skilled and well-able youth service across the county. But there is additional investment that goes into that from the National Lottery, etc., etc. What I did just want to talk about is some of the young people that are more on the fringes of youth work. And I think we've brushed on the edges of young people in ASB today at different points. And this year we've invested additional funding into detached youth work. And this is youth workers getting out there into the streets, into the shopping centres where there's often criticism of young people loitering or potentially causing ASB. And those detached youth workers will spend time getting to know the young people that are out there, understanding what's going on for them, why they're there, why aren't they engaging with other services. But over time, hoping to build rapport and direct them into other services, into other areas of support, and making sure they're safe and well. And all of that stuff, that there is no one quick hit to solve NEETs, is there? There's all careers hubs, there's loads of other stuff going on. But our youth provision has a massive role to play in turning the tide around NEETs.
All right, thank you very much for that. I think now is the point for Councillor Bales to come in and sum up, and then we'll move on to item 7.
Thank you, Chair. And first off, thank you for inviting me to this overview scrutiny panel today. It seems like it's already tonight, doesn't it? We've got a cabinet to go later. So thank you for that. And most importantly, thank you for Lisa in getting public health onto this ONS panel. And you'll be hearing a lot from me throughout this year about how public health should be cross-cutting on all panels, and that's education, community services, economy, environment and transport. Lisa did use a nice technical term for me, which is at the crossroads, being a highway engineer, but I think it's more about cross-cutting and getting across, not meeting, but we've got to go across there. So thank you for that, and we need to continue with this. Whilst we're advertising runs, there is a Barnt Green Fun Run coming up in the autumn. I'm not sure when it is yet, we're organising it, but we'll be looking to public health to try to see what we can do to help advertise that and get more people in whilst we're at it. Section 106 money is close to my heart, and I think I'm going to take that away and think how we can work with that across public health, because I look at a lot of developments going forward. Whilst we do get play areas, certainly one I've been looking at is we want to bring in running tracks around it, the whole estate, trying to get in that, and maybe a zip wire as well while we're at it. But I'm going to take that away. But just thank you for all the questions and comments. They've been very, very useful, and I'm going to take that away, and I'm sure Lisa will as well. And we've heard a lot about the initiatives we do and we're undertaking. So I do want to invite all you members here to get in touch if you've got any ideas on community grants which we can take forward, because I'm very quickly learning about the grants we've got, and that's why I advertised the Barn Green Run, seeing if we can get some monies in that. So thank you very much, Chair, and thank you for inviting us, and I'm delighted to be here, and all the other ONS panels. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, and I'd like to thank everyone for attending, and particularly the directors and the officers for the SEND and for the young peoples. And now we'll move on to the draft year-end budget monitoring. Thank you. Do we have questions for this already? Yes, we do.
Chair, would you like Holly to just summarise the budget position?
Chair.
Holly Hancock.
Right. Could I ask Holly Hancock to summarise the budget position?
Since I'm here, Chair, I'll do the corporate position. Just to, I know members have seen this, so I'll be brief in terms of time. I think in the pack ahead of you, you've got the year-end position. So we ended up as a council around about sort of balance break-even position, but that really does mask the underlying issues that the council has. So we use 33.6 million of exceptional financial support, so that's capitalisation directive, and 15.5 million of reserves. So effectively, we've used 49 million of one-offs to balance the budget, which is a very concerning position for the council. Effectively, all the areas in the council were underspent, apart from children's and adults, where there's pressures in adults and children's social care. So there's work to do there. In terms of the report, we had £12.5 million savings throughout the year. We delivered them in full, so that was positive in terms of that position. We've discussed today in terms of DSG, so I won't go massively into that, but obviously ending up the year with a deficit of £180.8 million, which is an eye-watering figure for the council, but that is up and down the country. And a number of councils, just on a side note, have published their accounts. Not everyone yet. We published a couple of weeks ago, but the cumulative debt of DSG has gone from 3.2 billion last year to 5.7, and when the remaining 20 councils publish their accounts, that'll be 6.5 billion, so it's almost doubled in a year. So we're not out of kilter in terms of that. So obviously the SEND reform plan is really, really important, and really important that we do get our high needs stability grant. Just touching on our sort of reserves position as well. So at the end of the year, we did plan to use 15 million reserves to balance the budget. Our reserves went from 93.7 million down to 75.8, which is a 19% decrease, which is concerning. But the areas of risk that we have got is only around about 18.6 million of those are deemed we can use to plan and use, because some of the grants are public health grant that's got conditions, some of them is for insurance, some of them are schools balances, and some of those are grants that are used for a specific purpose. So effectively that is an issue that we need to sort of really double down on, and actually making sure that we can get plans to make sure this council is more sustainable. So that's the corporate position, and I'll just let Holly touch on the specific areas of this panel, and then we can open it up for questions.
Thank you, Phil. I know there are quite a few new faces in the room, so I am just going to take a little bit of time, if that's okay. I know we're short, just to talk you through the finance specifics for the areas of the council that are covered in this panel, because I think it will be really useful and to help ensure that everybody's understanding what they're seeing within the pack that has been presented to you. So I'm going to start with what's on page 147 of your pack, and this is the out-term financial position for the Children's Directorate and also Home to School Transport, which is included in the remit of this scrutiny panel. Considering what we've discussed today in terms of DSG and SEND, I just want to make it really clear from the outset what spend is included within the Children's Directorate and what's included within DSG. So within this Children's Directorate figures here, you do have the cost of doing educational healthcare needs assessments and the cost of the creation and the reviewing of EHCPs, but the cost of delivering the support required within those plans plans is not included within the Children's Directorate itself, and that's what we're seeing. The cost of that is in the DSG overspend, which I'll cover a little bit later. What you're looking at here is the overall financial position at the end of last financial year. So for the Children's Directorate, if you kind of look around the middle of your page against the total children's line, you can see there was an overspend of just over £9.8 million at the end of the financial year, and an underspend in home to school transport of just over £7 million. If we look at Children's First, the most significant proportion of that £9.9 million overspend is spent on children's social care placements. So that covers about £7.8 million worth of that overspend. The other significant portion is within the realm of all age disability. So I just mentioned within the Children's Directorate, we do hold the cost for the needs assessments for children with SEND and the creation of those EHCP plans. And that's where you're seeing that increased demand for the need of those reflected in the overspend within all age disability. So we see that in the cost of getting the right level of educational psychologists that are needed to deliver that work. And also within, there had been an offer of a saving in relation to the running of Vale Lodge, and that has continued to operate throughout the last financial year. So you're seeing costs related to that as well. I'd also just like to point out at this point that the year-end position for children's had been very well accurately forecasted throughout the year, and I think that highlights really the mechanisms that we have, and I'm going to talk about this in particular in relation to social care placements. Our methodologies for calculating the costs relating to this are really strong and really good, and that's really reflected in that high level of accuracy. So we'll talk about placements then, as it is the largest cause of that overspend within children's. So this is where we start that the cost of that provision hinges on two main things really: the number of placements that we require for children across Worcestershire, and the mix of those placements, so whether they are delivered by our own internal provision or whether we're having to pay for the cost of external provision, and what kind of external provision that is. So there's some really useful information over the next few slides that highlights that a little bit more. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail, but there are a few things that I think are worth picking up. The next slide shows you this kind of the total number of placements in a chart, and where we are using those trends to help predict and forecast what we anticipate those placement numbers to look like in the future. And again, this is what is driving our forecasting, and we've had good success with using this as a mechanism. One of the things that, although we're looking at here what's happened in the last financial year, there is also a knock-on impact of what's happened in the last financial year to what then we look, within the current financial year and going ahead forward. And then the slide here that talks about agency residential numbers is a really key one to look at and understand the knock-on impact that it has for future as well. So although we're talking about last year's position, I'm going to start to lay those seeds to have you think about what that means for this financial year as well. So at the end of March 2026, the number of children we had placed in agency residential places had increased to 183 by the end of the year, and we'd started the year at 162. The average unit cost of those places also increased. So we went from, at the end of March 2025, the average cost of an agency residential placement being just over £6,500 to increasing to just under £7,500. Based on that increase in average unit cost, those additional 21 children within the year would have cost us around £8 million. And if we just took nothing out, took everything else out, and just looked at the increase in that average price, that the price inflation from the start of the year to the end of the year is to the tune of £7.3 million. So it kind of contextualises some of where that spend comes from. Then we start to think about, okay, well then we've got this increased number of agency residential places. How does that compare to what we thought we would be and where we set the budget for 26-27? So when we set our budget back last year, we had anticipated that we would end the last financial year with 178 agency residential placements. We didn't. We ended it on 183. We'd built into the budget growth and demand that we expected to end this current financial year on 187 agency residential placements. But you can see that's not a, considering we increased by 21 children last year and we're already starting the year with 183, you can kind of start to see how that might manifest in this financial year. It's also worth noting that our overspend on children's placements was just under £8 million. And if you take the top 10 costing placements as at the end of March 2026, those top 10 placements alone cost within the year over £8 million. So you can see again, it doesn't take a lot of those placements to manifest in what we're seeing. I'm going to skip a little bit over now to home to school transport. So this is where we had an underspend of £7.1 million at the end of last financial year. It's worth noting that there had been significant investment in the home to school transport budget and £10.6 million worth of growth had been added in. £3 million of that was in relation to net recurrent pressures from the previous financial year, and £9.6 million were to cover the growth in demand and the cost of contract inflation. Throughout the work the home to school transport team has been doing and reviewing contracts and looking at routes, obviously they've been very successful in delivering their savings plan and have ultimately meant that the level of growth that was built into the budget was obviously not needed in the levels that they needed. But we do anticipate with the increase in numbers of EHCPs that does still increase the demand in this service as well. Now I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about the dedicated schools grant. I know this is something we've touched on quite a lot throughout this, and obviously it lends itself very nicely to the SEN reform discussions we were doing earlier. And again, because I know there's a few new faces in the room, I'm quite happy to discuss this in as much detail as needed for people to understand what's going on. So we ended the DSG with an overspend last financial year of £82.6 million. That is largely within what's called the high needs block of the dedicated school grant. So the dedicated school grant is the funding we receive from central government to do our education provision within Worcestershire, and it's split into 4 blocks. The high needs block of that dedicated school grant is what pays for the additional support that is needed for children with SEND within Worcestershire, the support that is largely but not exclusively detailed within EHCP plans. Just to give you a little bit of context, again, I think this is a really helpful thing to do, is we were given a high needs block budget of £84 million from central government. At the end of March 2026, we had 8,623 EHCPs. If you split that number of EHCPs across the budget that we were given, that equates to just over £9,700 per EHCP within Worcestershire. Now, this is really simplistic terms. This isn't just what the high needs block covers, but if we kind of boil it down to some really easy to understand kind of figures, I think this helps give you a bit of context. We actually spent £172 million in the high needs block, and that's the equivalent of just under £20,000 per EHCP within Worcestershire. When a child is given an EHCP, there is an assessment done that how much additional funding is required to meet the support that's written within that EHCP. And we do this, we decide that funding on different bandings. The budget that we've been given, that just under £10,000 per EHCP, is just under what we would call a top-up band 3. And what we're spending is closer to a top-up band 4. So that kind of helps to contextualise when we talk about those big numbers. Actually, when you distill it down to the number of children that we're supporting, the figures aren't actually, I don't think, that eye-watering when you break it down into that level of detail. So the high needs deficit, it sits as an unusable reserve on the balance sheet, which is what we're allowed to do. But the problem with that is that statutory override does expire at the end of March 2028. Whatever is left on there becomes a Worcestershire County Council issue to fund. Throughout the high needs deficit management plan that we've been working with the Children's Directorate to action, we've been able to calculate what the financial impact is of the mitigating actions that we're doing to try and reduce the demand or the pressure on the high needs block. But even with that, considering the growth that you're seeing, those figures quickly add up. If I draw your attention to page 156 within your pack, this is the kind of summary table that shows that DSG position and how we anticipate it's going to look both, how it looked at the end of last financial year and how we anticipate it, how we're modelling it looking forward. So you can see we had a brought forward deficit, an accumulated deficit as at the beginning of last financial year of 98.2 million. Within the high needs deficit, you've just heard we overspent by £88.1 million. That's offset by some underspends within the early years block and the schools block. This is largely to do with where we have been allocated growth funding for schools that we haven't allocated within the year. That offsets some of that high needs overspend, and we ended up the year with an accumulated deficit of £180 million, 0.8. How we anticipate that going forward, so considering the data that we have on how this spend is increasing, considering how we know the increases in our EHCP numbers and what that looks like, we're forecasting or modelling at the moment that our high needs shortfall for this financial year will be around £115 million. We're going to offset that slightly with the financial impact of our deficit management plan and the actions that we're taking to try and reduce that. And we've talked earlier today about capacity. Some of that reduction in the pressure on the high needs block is because of the impact of capital projects and where we are increasing specialist provision within Worcestershire, and where we anticipate that will help reduce some of the costs around that. And then we anticipate the receipt of the high needs stability grant. So this is the 90% grant that central government have offered on contingent on our SEND reform plan being successfully accepted and approved. And we, with the receipt of that, that would mean that our accumulated deficit by the end of this financial year, we would expect it to have reduced down to £122 million. Hopefully that gives you a bit of good context, but again, I'm very happy to answer any questions, as I'm sure Phil will be as well, around that. And yes, I'll leave it over to you. Thank you.
Chair, just one more comment from me, just so you get the context of this. So effectively, the statutory override is a counting fudge at the end of the day off the balance sheet, but it's still a real cost to this council. So if you take the change between 24-25 and 25-26, that extra money that we've had to service cash out the door in terms of our DSG is huge in terms of that. So we internally borrow as a council. So last year we had a surplus cash because we got revenue and capital. So, but this is going to cause us huge pressures on our revenue budget. If this carries on, we don't get that high needs stability grant, we're going to have to borrow to cover the cash out the door for SEND services, and that will cost us around £8 or £9 million a year in terms of that. So that's why that high needs stability grant is key, and it's not and government do understand that now. We're putting the serious pressure on those around the impact that we have to service. What we're effectively doing is giving the government an interest-free loan of £181 million, and they don't have to pay for it, and we do, and it's not fair for the residents of Worcestershire to foot that bill. So I just put it is real cash. It's not an accounting fudge. Cash is going out the door at these rates.
Thank you, Phil. Adam, I think you would like to speak. No?
Always happy to speak, but I'm not sure I'm going to add any value beyond what you've heard. In terms of what both Holly and Phil have shared, I mean, Holly's summary is essentially a summary that the DLT, the leadership team within Children's Services, so Ruth and Daniela and the other ADs and myself, on a weekly basis, we're going through this. I won't elaborate any further. I think Holly's probably provided enough detail for people. Suffice to say that the predominant area in children's beyond high needs, and I think you've heard a lot about high needs today, in various forms. Please be assured, as best you can be assured, everything that we can do to get that 90% stability grant, we have done. I'm genuinely of that opinion. Proof is in the pudding, and we'll see what the DFE come back with in September, there or thereabouts, and all will obviously know that as well. The only additionality I would add is that obviously when you hear about figures like an outturn of just shy of £10 million overspent, you've heard the helpful context from both Holly and Phil. But the additionality is the associated cost avoidance. And this might sound like I'm saying to you all, be grateful that we only overspent to the tune of just under £10 million, because it could have been £22 million. The reason I'm saying that is because the associated placement pressures, £1,000 per week on average, happened in terms of increase in 1 year. That's a significant figure, to say the least. The same proportion of children are in residential care, 18%. We're in line with national average in that regard. At any given point, Ruth knows the figures off the top of her head. She Teams messages me every single Monday and says with pride, Adam, the total looked after cohort has not increased. In fact, it's gone down. It's not 1037, it's 1031. I cannot express the level of oversight and detailed oversight that is in place. It's culturally embedded. What we're trying to combat is beyond our control at this moment in time. I'll give you a chink of light though, because I don't want to end on a downer. The Children's Wellbeing in Schools Bill that I spoke about earlier on, this isn't going to be a radical transformation that happens overnight, but it is building on, in many respects, a preventative approach, which you all know works. It enables us to do more of that. It enables us to turbocharge, is maybe a little bit dramatic, but it enables us to boost an approach that helps to keep children out of care appropriately. And the existing approaches that are now incredibly well established, led by Ruth and others, in terms of where it's safe and appropriate for children to exit care, we do it, and we do it well. So I think that's important to understand.
Thank you very much, Adam. I understand that you will respond in written form to any questions.
I'm just very, very mindful of time, and folks may have questions with regard to the budget, the end of year outturn presentation that they've just heard. I know that there's also the associated data. So data with regard to SEND and education and social care. And then in as much as I'm sure that both Ruth and Daniela were eager to talk to you all about that and summarise that in finite detail, there won't be time. So in terms of the data and the key performance indicators, my suggestion was that if anyone has any questions they want to raise in that regard, maybe if they put that in writing to Sam Morris, I'd say to me directly, but I'm in Greece for a week. So to Sam, and then we can respond back in writing.
All right, thanks very much for that. So I think at this point we move on to the work programme.
Chair, I don't know whether members might have any questions on the budget. So performance is separate. So
yes, we obviously have.
Really
yes.
was relating to performance, but there may be questions on the budget. Then we can move on to the work programme.
All right, so looking at the hands in the room, first one I saw was Justin.
Thank you, Chair. I'll try to be brief. It's just a cautionary note, really, for the panel, and also for the cabinet member as well. That £8 million overspend on children's social care, you've heard that is almost entirely attributable to those residential care pressures. The solution to this that we had began work on was the development of therapeutic foster homes. These are the direct alternative to residential care. And we had set up a pilot identifying 19 young people in children's residential care, currently costing an average of £7,000 a month, that could bring those children out of residential care into those therapeutic foster homes. Every child that makes that move will save this county an average of £250,000. My cautionary tale is that pilot was started 2 months ago. I heard yesterday that to date, or over the last 7-8 weeks, no progress has been made on those. Now, 2 young people were lined up to make initial moves. That didn't happen for a number of reasons, which are understandable. But my cautionary tale is this. Driving those therapeutic foster homes, the growth in the capacity, both in-house and with external independent fostering agency providers, needs cabinet-level drive and commitment and time. It has to be the priority. I'm told that pilot is now in the hands of the coordinator, so one of the officers, lower junior level officer. Without that cabinet level drive and pushing it through, then it will not work. And you will end up in a position where that overspend, at the very least, doesn't come down, or in the worst case scenario, continues to rise. So I would urge all those who are in a position to do so to make this the number one priority, to build that capacity of therapeutic foster homes, and for this panel to supportively but scrutinise that, because otherwise, if you like, the so what if it doesn't happen is that the pressures will inevitably grow for cuts to frontline services. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I noticed Councillor Foster.
Thank you, Chair. It can be very brief. Just a question for Phil. If, assuming we get the 90% stability grant and we get that sum of money, that leaves £18 million approximately. That's our 10% negative, yes? That's the so my question is, does that just carry forward onto the 25-26 115 million negative, or does it actually hit this year's balance sheet as a negative 18 million pounds?
Answer that very simply. Yeah, the statutory override stays in place till 31st of March 28, so it will sit on as an unusable reserve. And how this will flow through is we're still working on years 2 and 3, so I've got conversations with the government on behalf of all the county councils around how this works. But if we assume we get 90% for the next 3 years, at the end of March 28, we'll have a deficit of around 44.6 million, which the council or the new 2 councils or 1 council are going to have to address. My view, and it's my personal and professional view, the government shouldn't be giving us 90%, they should be giving us 100%. But, well, that's a battle at the moment. 90% is better than nothing, but as it stands today, when we get the grant, March 28, we'll have a 44.6 million deficit on the balance sheet that the councils are going to have to look at and resolve in one way or the other. So we've got to build plans in place with the Send Reform Plan to make that 44 million be as least as possible, and then we'll work across this. But every other councils up and down the country are in this similar position, but it still needs a national solution.
So, thank you, Phil. So in other words, the 18 million negative doesn't hit the balance sheet this year. It's just carried forward, and the issue is we get 44 million negative in March 28, which you're trying to address to reduce to nil back through the lobbying.
Through lobbying, if it stands, it is 90%. Then effectively, the high needs plan, deficit recovery plan, will have an impact on that as well. But as we stand here today, if you roll forward to March 28, the new council or councils will, if that figure is the figure, they'll have to address that, and that will come off that balance sheet.
Thank you. We're out of time now, but I'm aware that I didn't give Adam Johnson a chance to respond to the last question.
I'll be super brief. It's in response to Councillor Bowen. Suffice to say, certainly from from an officer's perspective, the priority, I know you're passionate about it. I obviously know you're passionate about it, as we are. That drive continues to be there. I've certainly had those conversations alongside Councillor McVeigh. We've met with the officers who you know very well in terms of making sure that from both of our perspectives that remains a priority. I know your question is, I'm trying to look at you and talking to the microphone, it's quite complicated. Your desire is for this to remain up there from a cabinet priority perspective. I obviously can't talk from a cabinet perspective, but from a CMR perspective and an officer perspective, we agree.
Right, we are out of time. I will let Councillor McVeigh respond to that, but any further questions need to be forwarded to Samantha here, who will get written answers from the directorate responsible. Thank you.
Thank you. I just wanted to take the opportunity to reassure Councillor Bowen and to thank him for his work as Cabinet Member. I know that he understands what we're facing. The point you've made about developing the therapeutic foster homes just absolutely is a priority for me. So as Adam said, it's a priority for officers, it's a priority for me as Cabinet Member. So I hope that reassures you, just briefly.
Thank you very much, and thank everyone for being here. It's been a most instructive, interesting session, and look forward to more of them. Thank you very much.
Chair, are you deferring the last item?
Oh, I'm so sorry. Deferring the work programme, being already in written form, I think we can go with that as it stands. Thank you very much.